Popular culture is littered with stories of good people who fell in with a bad crowd, or stories that seem to indicate that the group that someone aligns himself with is vital to their success. These characters are, in large part, determined by the company they keep. In fact, I'd argue most of what you need to know about a character can be gleaned from their wardrobe choice or the color of their lightsaber. Are you Gryffindor or Slytherin? Miyagi-Do or Cobra Kai? Lost Boy or Pirate? Each of these identities carry with it an expectation of behavior regardless of the individual person it applies to. Is this just a storytelling device, or is there more to it? On today's episode of Think Significantly, we're going to discuss just how influential others are on us and what we might gain by being deliberate about selecting our friend groups. As my grandmother would remind me on a regular basis, you can't fly like an eagle if you're surrounded by turkeys.
Well, Pete, welcome back. I can tell you, I am so excited to be here with you on season 2. And I just had to get that out before we talk about your grandmother giving you Eagles advice, right? I'm sure it was Eagles.
The Eagles, yeah.
The
right.
Eagles, yes. The Eagles, fly, Eagles, fly.
It is wonderful to be back with you. It really is.
Awesome.
I've missed recording. Let's knock out some interesting stuff.
Well, okay. Melissa's happy to be back. Next. Ding. All right. Okay. Well, enough of the trivialities. My bad. All right. Okay. So why don't you give us a little background on this and what so possessed you to deem this worthy of our time to discuss this?
Oh, okay. So this concept, this idea that you're influenced by the 5 people you spend the most time with really came from the motivational speaker Jim Rohn. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if our listeners are super familiar with his name, but he's had a lot of influence on some important people that they might know. He mentored Mark Hughes, who was the founder of Herbalife. He mentored life strategist Tony Robbins, who everyone seems to know in some way, shape, or form. And he also had an influence on the careers of Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield, who are best known for the Chicken Soup series of books. So Mr. Rohn had a sphere of influence that stretched, in different aspects of popular culture. And what his idea is that it essentially boils down to that you need to surround yourself with the people you aspire to be.
And so with him surrounded by Mark Hughes, Tony Robbins, Mark Victor Hansen, and Jack Canfield, are those 4 of his 5? I'm wondering.
Oh, that's a great question. I wouldn't know. That's interesting.
Very, very interesting, right?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. I mean,
yeah.
Serious. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, the reason I brought it up since you asked is I think it fit well in our group dynamic sort of theme for the month. And mm-hmm. I think that personally I've come to appreciate the amount of influence that the people that I spend a significant amount of time with have on me. Mm-hmm. I think there are parts of my life that the people I spent my time with probably weren't the best for me to be advancing myself or being the most that I could be, let's say.
Okay.
And I think that had I known this concept or had I been conscious of this at the time, I might have made different decisions about who I was spending time with. Mm-hmm. And I think that could be really helpful to bring this sort of thinking to people's attention.
Sure. It's interesting to me that you said that maybe they weren't the folks who brought out the best in you. And I got from what you were saying, this sort of idea that you were looking to them to sort of like, I don't know, like sharpen your iron, for lack of a better word, right? To keep aspiring. And what I don't want to lose sight of, which would be a good pin probably for as we get deeper into this discussion, is this thought that those 5 people also owe you sort of like a supportive role, right? They have to be there not only to encourage you, but also to be sort of like that soft landing, just in case if you jump, like it's, you know, you don't land on the softest of surfaces. So I just don't lose sight of that.
No, it's absolutely something that's important. And I think something that we should circle back to before we're done talking.
Sure. So what's interesting to me about you bringing up your grandma is that we all realize that if you've ever been a kid or you've been a parent, if you've been one half of that dynamic, you're very familiar with this, right? Yes. Even if you're not a parent, you've been a kid before. I'm just saying, right?
Chances are good, right?
Yeah. And so, you have experienced this, whether you realize you were experiencing this or not. I mean, am I right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Exactly. That's exactly it. And I can remember when I was a kid, my parents wanting to know who I was with, what we were doing, just every detail about what our plans were. And this is, now keep in mind, listeners, that this is before the days of cell phones. So I'm dating myself a little bit, but I've considered myself to be mature, and I considered myself to be responsible. And it was frustrating to me that I didn't feel like they were giving me credit for being those things. But now that I'm a parent, I understand that you want your kids to hang out with good people, because that will keep them from being in situations that will end up getting them in trouble potentially. It's not about whether your kid is a good kid or not. It's about whether the group that he's with is a good group.
Right. Well, I'm going to say that, because the tribe that you keep, the company that you keep, does have a huge influence on you. I often say this, like, show me your friends and I'll show you who you are. And I didn't make up that quote, but I live by it for sure. Often when I'm meeting new people, I'm like, well, it's interesting to me, like, well, who do you hang out with? I mean, because it tells you a lot about a person. To your point, something that just came up on my gray matter here, something that transversed the bow as you were speaking is, I don't know if you're familiar with St. Augustine. Some people know him as a theologian. I studied him in philosophy class. And basically, so, I mean, he's ancient, right? He's from way before, he's like when you were born, like, well, basically, there's this famous story about him. It's this, we call it the pear tree incident. I know colloquially, him and a bunch of adolescent friends of his are shaking the fruit off a pear tree. Why? Oh, just so they could have pears. And they didn't even want to eat them. They weren't even hungry. So what they ended up doing, they ended up throwing them to the pigs.
Nice.
And yeah. And he actually says, if I was alone, I wouldn't have done it. I could not conceivably have done it myself. His whole thing was immorality is heightened when you're in a group. So I know I banked that a hard left right there. And you're like, what? Like, I just don't want my kid staying out late at night at the mall. And now he's got immorality, but
no, but that's, yeah, no, I think that ties together perfectly, actually, because as we know from history, St. Augustine himself wasn't a bad person. He was just with people that did bad things. So he did them with them, right? That's the lesson here. And that's what we're trying to avoid with our children.
Sure. Actually, St. Augustine has two very, his life is bifurcated, let's just say. His early days were, he was a rascal. He was
doing a lot of learning, is what he was doing.
He was doing some learning. Yes. Some adventures, he's on a journey. Yes. And then he had sort of like this, this moment where the tide turned for him. Yes.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and try to encapsulate what you said about Augustine, by saying that what he came to realize is that he believed that the people he was with were having a heavy influence on his personal behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his morality.
Right. And I'm going to segue from that into something that shows that the science backs him up. So David Youngkin, he's a social scientist. He and a bunch of his colleagues did a study, and they published their findings where your morality fluctuates depending on who you're with. Mm-hmm. So you could be, he gives an example of a anecdote with a husband and wife. The husband is a law-abiding, stand-up citizen, and learns that his wife committed a horrible crime, and he now has to help her hide the body.
Oh, Lord.
Right?
I married an axe murderer. Yes, right. I've seen this show.
Yeah, I mean, it could be any number of things, but ultimately, he feels his loyalty to her will outweigh his personal morality against the heinous act that she's committed. Mm-hmm. So knowing that that's what his study showed, it's that much more important, and it lends that much more credence to Augustine's experience that you have to be careful who you're spending your time with. If you're spending your time with a bunch of people who are potentially going to ask you to do things that are against your personal ethos or your personal morality, mm-hmm. then you're going to bend your morality because that's who you're with. Mm-hmm. And if you hang out with people that are more, law-abiding good, for lack of a better term.
Law-abiding good. Law-abiding good.
That's a like a game reference. But the if you're hanging out with them, you don't have to worry about them asking you to hide a body, for example.
Sure. I think what's interesting, especially since we brought up that study, is that there is research that shows that it's actually not just between us and the folks that we're hanging out with. I think you know what I'm talking about. There was that heart study. It was like Christakis and Fowler.
Yeah, Framingham. Yeah.
The Framingham. Yes, the Framingham heart study. So they amassed this massive amount of data, and basically what they did is they started with obesity, mm-hmm. and what they found was there's a relationship not only between your personal weight gain and if a friend was obese, right? That makes sense to me.
Sure.
But there's a link between your weight gain and whether or not the friend of a friend was obese, regardless if you knew this person or not.
Yeah. That's fascinating, isn't
it? It is. And I've tooled around with this in my brain like this entire week, trying to think through this and why this could be. Mm-hmm. But there's some crazy stats. So like here, if I have a friend who is obese, I have a 45% chance of gaining weight, which are things that I do not need in my life. Okay. So we need to, right. I don't need any of this, but listen to this craziness. If my friend's friend, okay, is obese, I have a 20% chance of gaining weight. And then wait, they took it out one more iteration. If a friend of a friend of a friend, right? So I'm now talking about my friends, 2 friends out who I probably mm-hmm. do not know. I do not run in a circle.
Right.
If that person is obese, I have a 10% chance of being obese. And they did it with smoking and happiness too.
Yeah. Yeah. And the effects of smoking mimic those of the obesity as far as the deleterious effect as you go further out. I thought happiness was striking in that it's the only thing of the couple studies that we're discussing where geographical proximity had an impact. So mm-hmm. if my friend is happy, there's a 15% chance above average that I will be happier. Mm-hmm. If a friend's friend is happy and lives nearby, then I have a 10% chance to be happier. If that other person, if that influencing effect is further away than a couple miles, I lose that benefit. It's really amazing. And and if I can plug season 1 still, that calls us back to our first episode where we talked about the importance of face-to-face communications versus online relationships. Having that face-to-face, especially apparently in the realm of happiness, just means so much more than trying to connect with somebody over a long distance and get that same benefit.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's interesting to me is that these studies seem to indicate that we are much more connected than any of us realize. So plug away at episode 1, because that's what that was all about, right? Connection.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So even though we're talking about the Fab Five, right? The 5 guys that are in our group that influence us the most, really our sphere of influence reaches much farther. Right. And I say that meaning 2 things. Who influences us is much bigger than we think. And who we influence, right, is much bigger than we think as well, too.
Yeah. 100%. And I think it can be explained by looking at the fact that in our tight group, like you said, if somebody in our group is a smoker, if somebody that we spend a lot of time with is a smoker, chances are we're going to be around them while they're smoking. And we have that explains our 69% chance that we're going to start smoking or be a smoker ourselves. Mm-hmm. That same relationship exists in each of our 5 friends with their 5 people.
Sure.
Right. So it just becomes a math game at some point where they're being influenced by those people who are then influencing us. It's really, it's mind bending in some ways, but it's really just, when you look at it mathematically, it just makes a ton of sense that we're all interconnected and we're all having these influences on each other without even having to know each other. Well,
what's interesting is I was thinking about, well, how do you make friends? Mm-hmm. And similarly, what do you do with friends, right? You make friends because you're hanging out. Right. What do you do with friends? You're hanging out, right? So what do friends do? They're going to brunch. And this explains why my friend Becky's friend Susan is obese, because they're brunching and now I can't button my pants, right? I mean, that's really, and if I'm a smoker, I'm in a bar on a Friday night, right? Probably, right? I'm not at the library, let's say, smoking. So it just makes sense because you're kind of like doing the same stuff together.
Right. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's the whole, birds of a feather flocking together in this mm-hmm. Example. But what we want to maybe highlight here is, let's say you're a smoker, right? Let's say you've got a group of friends that you smoke with. Sorry, that sounded. How many
times have I sent out a text like, want to go smoke? Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. That's what I do in my spare time when I'm recording podcasts.
So the point is, if you want to stop smoking, hanging out with these people that you've smoked with for I don't know how long is going to make your effort much, much harder.
Yeah, but based on this, I mean, I hate to be the dour person here, but this means I got to like run around to like 125 people to make sure I got no smokers in this group, right? Because Nancy's friend Sarah's friends Mary's is going to affect, right? According to this crazy study that they did.
Yeah, no, you're right. But I don't think you really, I think if you're a betting person, you're willing to take the 11% chance mm-hmm. that a third order person might influence you over the 69% chance that a first order relationship is going to influence you.
Sure. And I have to remember the flip side of the coin is that I'm also an influencer. I'm influencing those 5 people in my group.
Right.
So I wonder if they've done, and if they haven't, they need to research on what about people who then choose not to smoke, choose not to drink, choose not to whatever it be.
Yeah, that would be a fascinating, I think that would be a fascinating branch to this. I don't know that they've done that, but how interesting would those results be, seeing how somebody who intentionally tried to buck the behavior that they're being influenced on, mm-hmm. what they had to do to be successful. You know, if they were successful, if they weren't successful, what, you know, what might have undercut their efforts. I think that would be amazingly interesting.
So for those of you taking quantitative methodologies this semester, we have an idea for you.
Yeah.
You can advance the discipline.
That's right. I'll be there with you in a couple semesters, I think.
So what's interesting to me is that there's a theory that keeps coming to mind. There's a guy, Kenneth Burke, and he has this theory of identification. And basically he says that, because we're talking about this birds of a feather thing, right? So basically his concept is that when one identifies or allies with another, it's because of something called, ready? Consubstantiality.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. But basically it makes sense. It's con, right? Like with something substantial. Like we have substance in common.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. And it's through this consubstantiality that individuals are able to persuade each other. And he's a comms guy. I gotta just throw that out there because he's saying that like language allows us to relay our consubstantiality with another individual, but that just makes sense. What else are you gonna do? Mime it? You know what I mean? I'm at the bar and I'm trying to light a cigarette, just like I'm like, I got the white face and like the black and white striped shirt on. Yeah, I'm like, yeah. Well, he says that we can, we seek identity, or that there is identity basically with other people on a couple of different fronts. So you could have like a materialistic identification, like, oh, you're a Jeep owner? I'm a Jeep owner, right? You could have idealistic identification where everything, like we have the same sort of values, we're in the same political party. Formal identification, like all those people who are Iron Men, right? And Iron Men, right? That's definitely that formal identification.
Like a fraternal, yeah.
Right, because you know, they all have the tattoo on the back of their calf and the, you know, of course, the 140, whatever it be, sticker on the back of their car. And trust, I would put that shit on my forehead if I complete one. I'm not knocking them. Yeah. And he also talks about this other one, which is a little bit tangential, but it's also about mystification. And that's basically like people who are like in a lower social strata will sometimes identify with people in a higher social strata. You know, it's like fandom, if you will.
Like a parasocial thing?
Yes. Like I think I know you more than I actually know you, because you're in my Teen Beat magazine and I have your I have your glossy centerfold put on my wall. You know? Yes. Scott Baio. Yeah. not present day Scott Baio. But back in the day.
No. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Very fascinating. So here's where I want to go with this. I have two kind of thoughts banging around my head. One is that I'm going to take this as these are the 5 people that I spend most time with, but I got to admit that, like, I remember back in the day when the 5 people I spent the most time with were generally shorter than my knee, right? And I was like, wow, that explains a lot. I pretty much was the summation of those people. You know, you're eating goldfish crackers out of the seat of your car, looking for gum. Yeah,
that's right.
All those things. But
napping during the day, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah, the whole 9. Yeah, right, exactly. Playing My Little Pony. Yeah. But I guess but when you come out of that, when you emerge, right, then now you're really talking about this friend group that you do have some sort of sway over, right? You could be more selective. It's not like you could be like, hey, little Johnny, you're not cutting it these days, and I don't want to be like you anymore. So sorry.
Well, I think it's, and I think what I think you're saying what I'm about to point out. I hope anyway is when you're dealing with that relationship specifically with a parent-child relationship, you're developing them into the person that you want to be spending time with.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right? I mean, I like to think that with my children, I've done that, where I, you know, you share your interests with them, you share your moral code with them, you share your work ethic with them, you share your sense of humor with them. And as they grow, they become this person that's an amalgamation of the things that you shared and the things that other people have shared, and but there's a core of you in there.
Sure.
So it's really,
you had a big dramatic pause there for a minute, Pete, and I thought you were going to say, and as they get older, you share, and I was like, your wardrobe and the same car.
Also true, but yeah,
yes,
not what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yes. So maybe we pivot and we talk about the 5 people we keep that are more in the friends lane, the coworkers lane, the people that are we're spending most time with, say, in a sport or hobby of some other variety.
Sure.
Because I actually, in preparation for this discussion, I came across this woman. Her name is May Pang. She is a connection guru. And what she did, which I thought was both like awe-inspiring and ruthless, and potentially on my list for 22, was that she conducted this assessment exercise, right? Where she paid very close attention to the relationships that already existed in her life. And she also was like, these are like new ones that I would like to cultivate. She did it very logically, very analytically. So already she's my hero. She basically, at the end of every day, she wrote down anybody that she spent an hour with that day or more. So that could have been like the barista, if the barista talked to her for more than an hour.
Sure.
Right? So anyway, she ended up doing this for like 2 weeks. And then what she did, this blows my mind, is she rated those interactions. So she like kind of graded them. Did she feel energized, drained, anxious, empowered, defensive? Yeah, she puts down like the descriptors about how she felt about it.
So so she makes those interactions. She does like a qualitative analysis, essentially, of how each of those interactions went, and I'm assuming where you're going with this is she then determines whether or not they had the impact that would cause her to want to continue to have those interactions.
Yes. So after she sort of like assesses them, then she sort of puts her filters on this, because she had some like top 3 must-haves, like things that she specifically looked for in these folks.
Okay.
And she also had like a deal breaker.
Sure.
Yeah. And if they, deal breaker is a deal breaker, man. Yeah, exactly. And then she basically, she was very intentional about making sure that she was saving her best self for the people who mattered the most, which means she broke up with some folks, right?
Sure.
Yeah, she got rid of some of those toxic relationships, or I don't even want to categorize them as toxic. They just weren't maybe the best. If you only have 5 slots, who are you spending your time with?
Right. No, right. It's, I mean, time, our time is a finite resource. And if you're gonna spend any of it in a interaction with someone that doesn't fulfill you, and potentially take time away from spending that time with someone who does, give you that boost of energy, that's just bad business.
Right.
I mean, for lack of a better term. So I think her ruthlessness is warranted.
I like how you said it was like a finite resource, because I often think of time as money, and not just in like a witty little thing to say, but I often think to myself, like, how much is this costing me? You know? So if I only have $100 in my day to spend, like, who's getting some of that? Like, you really don't have all that much time during your day to spend.
No, you really don't.
Frivolously, or, so you have to be, you have to be ruthless, like you were saying.
You have to be intentional. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
Now, I'm curious about her. You said that she was choosing people based on aspirational efforts.
That's what she had said. Yeah, it was interesting. In the article I ran across, like, who does she want to be with? Right? Yeah, absolutely. So it was right. I thought that was very profound there.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because it gets into some of what I read in various articles about the business advice of choosing your group of people well. And it was basically around, again, aspirationally, choosing people who you want to parrot, perhaps, in their careers. And that just really, like, it didn't strike me as the best advice in general. I'm going to couch that those articles came from business sources. They were aimed at business people, with the goal of forwarding your career aspirations. But I personally am of the belief that our life is not what we do. Like, that doesn't define us. That we are more than our career. And I struggled with whether or not it would be better for us to choose people who we aspire to be like in their accomplishments versus choosing people who we strive to be like in their being. And let me expound on that, because that seems very vague. But if you're an entrepreneur and you want to be the best entrepreneur, you might want to hang out with, in a fantasy world, you might want to hang out with Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Jamie Dimon, and these captains of industry. But I just wonder if, as a person, that's the best thing for you. If they're not, if spending time with them isn't going to fill your tank, so to speak, if they're not going to give you what you need outside of that business persona, I just don't know that cultivating those relationships is worth it.
Right. I think this goes back to what I said at the top, though, is that they have to be both for you, right? They have to be not only encouraging you to be this forward-leaning individual, but they also have to be there to just support you, right?
Absolutely. And I think I think that captures it very well. I think that's more important, is what I'm trying to say. Regardless of if that friend is, a plant manager, or if he's a mechanic, or any job, their genuine support for you and I'm going to call it cheerleading, and their honest feedback is going to be more helpful to you in your aspirations than if you're hanging out with people who have accomplished what you're trying to accomplish but don't really care for you.
So you bring up a good point, and I think we can't lose sight of this. You have to choose people who choose you back.
Yes.
And if you're not getting someone who's choosing you back, you can easily just cut sling load on them right then, but you might even want to dive deeper, and you might want to figure out why that is. I would say in some relationships where I've been in that I'm not being chosen back, it's because that relationship really lacked authenticity. And when you're saying about me hanging out with Bezos because, I think he can advance my career, he would not be wise to have me in his circle because I'm not being an authentic actor, right? Like, I want something out of this.
Right.
Right. He also needs a soft space to land. So, if I'm not providing that to him, I should not be one of his top 8 on his MySpace. I just not. Well, you still have MySpace accounts. Yes.
Well, right. Honestly, the way Facebook's going, we'd all be better off on MySpace. But...
Right. I know. But where would I put pictures of my bagel? Yes,
true,
that's right.
True.
You're like on Instagram. Duh.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Meta.
Yes.
But yes. Before we lose track, before we get too off on a tangent here, yes. Choose people who choose you back. And that I wanted to comment on that when you mentioned breaking up with toxic people. It's hard to do. It's just when you recognize that somebody's toxic, if you're taking evaluation of the people you're spending time with, as Ms. Pang was, and you're noticing that, hey, this relationship doesn't serve me.
Right.
This isn't mutually beneficial. This is somebody that's taking and not giving, or however you want to couch that. ending that relationship is good for you. I would argue it's imperative that you do it, but it's hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't want people to think that either of us are advocating for or trying to suggest that changing these groups of friends is just something that you can do at the drop of a hat. It's not. It's hard work. It's effort. It's going to be painful. Losing a relationship is painful, even if it's a bad relationship.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So what I was going to say is too, I feel like toxic is so heavily charged,
Yeah.
and usually it's not even that, right? Like I'm going to say the silent killer in any relationship is complacency.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about these situations too, where you're like, I'm just not being fed. And I'm thinking, I also have to evaluate the energy and attention that I'm bringing to that relationship every time I show up. So,
Yeah.
you can almost create like this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy where you're like, I'm not getting much out of this. So I'm not, and like you're Eeyore that day, and you're not bringing much to it.
Right.
Well, then that other person's not going to feel energized either. So you always, in anything, you have to look in the mirror for sure.
Absolutely.
And I'm with you. It's definitely not easy. Sure. I have a question for you, because,
Sure.
so I realize that 5 spots is not a lot, but there's some wisdom out there. I say that loosely, that talks about, you have to have a critic also in there, right? Like I have to have very specific roles. Like, you have to have somebody who will braid your hair and call you pretty, and someone who will just like cut you down to the core. I don't know about this critics idea in my top 5, and I was just wondering what your thoughts are on it.
I think I want to say, first of all, whether or not you intended to do this, thank you for teasing next week's episode, which is about the roles that we play in our friends groups.
Pete, I have no idea what's next week's episode. Well, I haven't gotten that far, man.
That was the best plug I think I could have come up with for it. That was fantastic. Next week, we'll be talking about those roles.
I had no idea.
Do you need it? Does every group need a critic? That's kind of the gist there.
I just showed my hand to show you that I have not done the research for next week. I apologize in advance. I'm sure it'll be amazing though. I'll get right on it as soon as we push stop record, but go ahead.
So I'm going to double down on something I said earlier, and that's find those people that are genuine. Mm-hmm. Find those people that above all else are concerned about you.
Right.
If they're interested in you being successful, if they're interested in you being healthy, if they're interested in you being cared for, part of all of those things is criticism. If I truly care for somebody and they're going to do something that I think is a bad idea, I'm going to tell them it's a bad idea. Mm-hmm. I'm going to warn them against doing whatever it is they're saying they're going to do.
So you want to go throw pears at pigs? I'm going to tell you no. Just letting you know.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it. Right. I'm not doing it, man.
Yeah. I mean, that's had Augustine been hanging out with people who were genuinely interested in him.
Sure.
They might have said, hey, why would you do that?
Right.
That's not who you are. That's not who I know you to be. Mm-hmm. Why would you pursue this?
Sure.
And that might have been enough to get him to go, wait a minute, why am I going to do this? Mm-hmm. So I don't think you need a person to be a critic. I think you need a genuine person. And the more genuine people you can find, the richer your life is going to be.
Agreed. Yeah. As soon as I heard critic, I immediately went to something we use in the change management world, which is called red teaming. Mm-hmm. And that's where you are like, you adopt that adversarial approach, because then it makes your plan or your policy or your system even that much stronger. It's like devil's advocate. But I thought to myself, besides Nancy, who eats too many bagels and now I'm fat, I also don't need this in my top 5, but I love the way you framed it. I think that makes so much sense. And if I could, just a quick wrap up here because I found another study. It's an old study.
Okay.
It came out of Harvard, and it really just sort of underscores really how important it is that we are happy in our relationships, because they are a powerful predictor of our health and longevity. Mm-hmm. Like above other things, above IQ, above like good genes. Like I could
Oh,
have
wow.
crappy teeth, right? Like thanks mom and dad, but like I have a really good friend group. Yeah, more powerful than social class even. So yeah, it's very important, picking your five and how you do that.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful way to sum this up, to bring this discussion to a close, because it shows, just as I'm kind of cataloging the things that you listed off, if it's irrespective of social class or IQ or genes, or I don't remember what else you said, those are especially social class is an indicator of, I'm going to use air quotes here and be like success as we define it in America. And it really gets to the heart of being fulfilled by the people you spend your time with.
Right.
So I think that's a wonderful study, very, very relevant, and puts a nice cap on this discussion.
Well, awesome. Well, let's wrap it up then. Let's do it.
Oh yes, let's it's been a minute since we've done a send-off.
I know, right?
Mellisa and I would love to continue this discussion with you on social media. Give us your thoughts on how you feel your friends influence you, or on how you influence your friends.
Think about who's in your top five and why, and you don't necessarily have to share that with us, but I do think spend some time thinking if they deserve to be in your top five. We'd love to hear, though, if you've consciously sought out a new friend group, and why. What caused you to seek that change? And we're betting it wasn't easy, like Pete mentioned to before. So reach out and share with us.
Yeah, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkSigPod, and on Facebook and LinkedIn by searching for Think Significantly.
And if you enjoyed our conversation, please invite one of those top five friends to listen, or one of their top five.
Yeah,
or one
spiderweb,
of their top five.
Spiderweb that thing out to all three tiers. We need all 125 people to know.
Right? Because if Mary is listening, then that means 3 iterations over, right, is going to listen. If we go with the obesity, smoking, right, happiness study.
Yeah, there's if you start listening, there's a 40% chance your friends will start listening. That's just science.
Same car with you when you drive carpool. Hashtag facts. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So Pete and I will be back next week to tackle another thought-provoking topic, which I just discovered what it was. Thanks for that. And until then, we encourage everyone to think significantly about the world around you.